recording, I will hand over to Konstantina. That appears as though we are now live, Konstantina. So if you want to unmute, I will hand over to you. I'll be here in the background if you've got any questions.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Richard. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this session today. I'm very happy to talk you through the KDIM journey. So yeah, just like a quick intro, I'm here today to talk to you a bit about how AI startups function and work and what it's like to I guess, start one. So before I go into the details, let me tell you a bit about what we do at KDIM. So KDIM, in a nutshell, we're building B2B SaaS software. So we are building enterprise solutions that streamlines digital 3D asset creation at scale. Now, what does this mean? This means, like, I don't know if any of you have played video games. I'm sure you have, like, probably the majority of you have played video games. But what the video games are made of is essentially hundreds or even thousands of digital 3D models. Everything that you see in a 3D video game is actually a small 3D model. And all of these things traditionally are made from scratch by hand. So imagine like a sculptor in real life that creates a sculpture. They take a block of marble or something, and then they start sculpting it to create the shape that they actually want the sculpture to have in the end. So digital 3D modeling is actually not at all far from a physical sculptor, because what you do is you literally take a cube of digital mesh, and then you start kind of like doing all of these operations on top of it to create the digital 3D model that obviously has a shape. So at KDIM, what we do is we have developed machine learning algorithms that do 2D to 3D reconstruction. So they turn a 2D image of an object into a digital 3D model. And then those algorithms combine with our expert in-house 3D team. So we have a team of 3D artists to deliver game-ready 3D models 10 times faster than traditionally. Why? Because traditionally, as I said, it's like 100% manual. And we'll go into, in the next slide, why is this even a problem? Before I tell you about the problem, this is me. About 6 to 7 years ago, I was a computer science student at the University of Bristol. I don't know if for some reason we made a YouTube video out of a project and this has stayed into the archives. But essentially what I'm hoping to go through today is how we went from there, which is just like on a desk at the University of Bristol, knowing nothing about anything startup related. Like seriously, this face there knows nothing. To earlier this year, closing our Series A with Andreessen Horowitz in San Francisco, and supporting one of the top 10 games of all time with our software. So how did this transition happen? So let me tell you how everything started. So during my computer science degree, I started getting involved a lot in computer graphics, game development, and 3D modeling. This was mainly because our university had this focus in game dev, and so they had all of these adjacent units on 3D modeling. So one of the 3D modeling projects, had us choose one of the buildings in Bristol and recreate it in digital 3D. I wish what I show here to have been my building, but it wasn't. Mine was uglier. So I chose one of the city's cathedrals, not this one, without really knowing that I was making a very, very big mistake. But yeah, I knew nothing about 3D modeling. So the first time I opened the 3D modeling software, that was back then Maya Autodesk, I see, a user interface with like thousands of buttons, no idea how to turn a cube. It loads with a cube, no idea how to turn the cube into anything useful. And then started watching like endless of tutorials of like, how do I use this program to make anything? And just to give you an idea of the rate of progress, it took me like 2 days to build a chair that would go in the cathedral. So that hopefully that gives you an idea of how hard this is. So anyway, that's how I realized how difficult and time consuming 3D modeling is. And actually, this is when it clicked in my mind, and I realized that all video games that all of my classmates, all of my CS classmates were playing every single day for like multiple hours, are actually made by hundreds of 3D models. It hadn't clicked in my mind until that moment, until the moment I had to make my own chair in 3D. So the next logical question I had was like, wait a second, how do all these guys, game devs, do this at scale, right? Create thousands of 3D models for many games, and yeah, how does this work? They must have something. Must have something that I don't have in automation. So doing further research, I realized they have nothing, and that's essentially one of the biggest bottlenecks to video game creation right now. How 3D models are made. So here I made here's like an illustration, a screenshot from The Last of Us. And everything has like a price tag on top of it. And as you can see, like every single scene costs tens of thousands of dollars to be created. Um, so yeah, how do they do it? The answer is they do it by hand, and it's extremely expensive and it's very time consuming. And as hardware advances, obviously, PlayStation advances, new versions are out, and they support higher and higher quality graphics. So this means that game developers need to upgrade their graphics, because anything that's not like up to what the hardware can support seems low res. So you're really pushed to make better and bigger worlds for games. So, so all of what I've said so far is pretty much what I was thinking, back at university before I graduated. And I don't know, I this is a half joke, but I was like, this seems a hard enough problem. There's no solutions out there in the market. So I started searching. There was no, software that could help with that. There is little to no research. We're talking about like 2018, 2019. So I was like, what else do you need? This is your idea. Let's go do something on this space. So yes, that's how everything started, I guess. So what came afterwards is actually the fun part. And I made this slide yesterday, and I was like, there is a lot of good things that happened, but also there's a lot of hard things and a lot of struggles and a lot of mistakes. And I'm not sure all founders kind of like show all that. So I wanted to be like really true here and share with you like some aspects of the roller coaster. So everything started with us winning the first prize at the startup competition at Bristol. And back then that was like $10,000. It was the biggest amount of money I had ever seen in my life at, 21 years old. And that got us started. And in my mind, I was like, $10,000, I can live off of that for like, I don't know, 5 years. No, I didn't think that. But I was like, this is enough to get started. It never crossed my mind that this is not enough money. I think many people nowadays fall in the trap of like, oh my God, I need to raise a lot of money. I need to, hire a lot of people. No, you can get started with 10K and then figure your way out. I'm here to tell you that. I mean, obviously, then we got like our first angel investor, who gave us like a bigger sum of money, but still, it was very, very small compared to like to Silicon Valley standards of like millions of seed round. Um, what I want you to notice here is that I started applying to Y Combinator. So the moment I learned about Y Combinator, how many? If can you raise hands, everyone who knows what YC is, Y Combinator? Okay, 2 people, 3 people, 6, 8. Okay, you guys are okay. So we have like 1/5 of the people here who know what Y Combinator is. For the rest, Y Combinator is essentially the most popular startup accelerator in the world. It's based in Silicon Valley and has funded startups like Stripe, Airbnb, um, and many more that are like at the top of the world right now. So for those of you who know, there's like 2 batches per year. And from the moment I learned about it, I started applying. And you can see here, I applied 6 times. The first time, like you can see on the timeline, like there's 6 different occasions where I applied. And let me tell you, there's very few people who have applied so many times. We got in finally, actually last year, but we didn't take the deal because we also had the term sheet for our Series A from A16Z. Anyway, so back to the timeline. When we got our first like angel money in, I think one of the main mistakes I made was I started hiring, and without obviously having figured out myself the product or the technology or what we're doing. And I think if I were to go back, this is one of the first things that I would do differently and change. I think it's very, very important to, I guess, spend a lot of time alone or with your co-founders, figuring out what you really want to build and what this looks like, and what people you need to join you, what are the most important things that they can contribute to. I did not do that, and the first hires had a lot of mistakes in that I had to fix. Another really important point here is that, you know, if you're a startup founder, if you're planning to do a startup, you're gonna make mistakes. That's fine. The most important thing with mistakes is actually to realize that you made the mistake and then fix it as soon as possible. And this applies to everything. You know, you'll make hiring mistakes. You can go down a path where, you know, you spend 6 months to fix this, and, you know, say to the person, look, this is not working out, we need to part ways. Or you can spend 2 weeks, 4 weeks. And I think fixing mistakes fast is actually one of the biggest advantages you can have, having this like really snappy, okay, this is not working, let's move on. We either need to fix it or let's move on. This like really fast behavior of something is not going well here, let me fix it. But yeah, moving on, like, you know, a lot of mistakes, we fixed the mistakes. We launched an MVP, like this was like at this point 1 year and a half in the journey, in like late 2021. And this was really the, you know, the most important point, I would say. Why? Because we were delaying to release the MVP. And, you know, this is a mistake you hear a lot from, especially for you guys that have listened to YC Talks. They are like, go release your product in the market, take user feedback, iterate based on user feedback. But with Kadim, I think there was this additional difficulty of, oh my God, what we're building is essentially deep tech, they were calling it back then. Well, so how are we supposed to build the product on top of research that doesn't exist? Maybe we need to do research. And it was a very tricky situation because obviously we were a startup and we are a startup. So it's very hard to do research. It's very hard to devote the resources to just purely research because you have metrics, you have investors, you need to have revenues. So difficult situation there. So the solution that I came up with back then was like, okay, fine. You know, we don't have the tech figured out. That's a reality. We might not have it figured out for many years, since there's so little research. So let's do a hybrid approach of introducing 3D artists into the team, and let's see where this takes us. Let's take, you know, the state-of-art reconstructions, combine them with 3D artists, and see if people are willing to buy this. And to my surprise, they were. Literally to my surprise. So this is how we got our first 3 ever subscriptions, by going to a game dev event in London, actually. And that's how really the product journey started, because you can't start your product journey unless you have something in the market, you know, being tested, criticized by people, getting this feedback. And obviously then it's up to you how fast you're gonna iterate based on that feedback, and how fast you'll release the next and the next version of the product. So from the moment we launched our MVP a bit before the end of 2021, we what do you say? A bit, I guess like a year after we launched the MVP, we actually were able to break even. How did we do this? That's rare, but we had a very lean team. And I think our growth hack was to introduce trials. So middle 2022 here, where we applied to YC for the 4th time, if you can see the diagram, I was like, you know what, we don't have enough customers. I don't know, it probably had been like 6 or 7 months, and we had, I don't know, 10, 15 customers. I don't remember the numbers. And I was like, so what can we do to quickly get a lot of customers? Because 10, 15 customers did not give us enough feedback to actually make meaningful product iterations. And actually the idea came from another YC company. I was chatting with the founder. Chatting with other founders is incredibly helpful. I've gotten so much help from fellow founders over the past couple of years. And he was like, why don't you do a trial, a very kind of like short amount of investment, so like a couple dollars, where people can try the product. And we did that. And this led to summer 2022. We went completely viral. We got like 40 or more new customers. It might seem a little, but 40 new customers back then was enough to literally bring down the platform. Because if each of them does a couple of requests, let's say three requests, so we had 120 requests running at the same time. We had like nowhere enough 3D artists to help us serve these requests, etc. And everything starts kind of like really being tested. So that was good. But yeah, so off the back of that, we kind of like became profitable. We had a very lean team based in London. So the money from like 40 customers, who are all businesses, they're not like obviously consumers paying like $5 each, were enough to mark us profitable as a company. This is about the time that I tried to raise a seed round. And that was an interesting story. So up until that point, I was raising in Europe, and specifically in the UK. We have some stellar angels on board from the UK. And however, getting funding from European VCs, like putting angels aside, was very hard. I had like a very hard time to convince them. I was getting, a lot of commentary like, oh my God, you don't have a PhD. Who do you think you are? You're only X years old. What do you know about anything? You know nothing. Anyway, that's fine. This was the fun moments. So anyway, I was having real struggle fundraising in Europe. And I decided that my seed round, I'll go to Silicon Valley to fundraise. So that's what I did. I took a plane, I came over, and I was trying to raise $2 million seed round. And for after COVID, that was not a lot. That was, people were raising much, much more. And I failed. So I wasn't able to raise $2 million that I wanted for my seed round. And again, like with fundraising, if you think about it, it's a time commitment to an activity that does not contribute to actually, getting more customers, building the product, growing the revenues. Obviously, fundraising might be necessary, right? You need money to invest in product, and you need money to invest in sales. But I think there is a balance between getting money for getting money. There's something fancy about 15 million Series A, and getting money because you need money. I think there's a balance between these two. And yeah, obviously it's fancy to raise a lot of money, at the same time, do you really need it? So why do I say all this? Because this is something that pretty much happened with my seed round. So I started raising. I got a small fund on board from San Francisco. I got a couple angels, and I was like, I don't know, 600K out of 2 million. And already 2 weeks had gone by, which was kind of like the amount of time that I would invest. And I was like, obviously I had discussions going, so I did extend a bit, like up to 4 weeks. But then, I forced myself to make a really hard decision. I was like, look, you have two options. You either continue to fundraise because you want to hit the 2 million mark, or you stop where you are now. Do you have enough money for the next year? Do you have enough money for the next 1.5 years? Okay, if the answer is yes, and it was in my case, stop now, go back to building and prove them wrong, kind of thing. So actually A16Z passed my seed round. And then they paid 5 times the price for my Series A 9 months later. So instead of like continuing to fundraise and kind of like, talking to more and more investors, I said, fundraise is over, let's go back to building. And then for 9 consecutive months from autumn 2022 to when A16Z came on board in summer 2023, that was 9 months. I was every single month sending investor updates to all the investors that I really liked, that I had met, showing them the progress. And the progress was exponential. We were growing 30% month on month for like 9 months straight. And this is actually how we both got into YC, because they could not ignore us anymore. After 3 years, they were like, okay, oh, these guys are like 100K MRR, what's going on? And also got A16Z, one of the most stellar investors in Silicon Valley, to do our seed round, unfortunately saying no to YC. I see there are some questions. Do you guys want to do questions in the end? I'll reserve like 20 minutes for questions. And you can ask me anything you want. It's an AMA. Awesome. Okay. Cool. So yeah, I'm reaching the end here of the timeline. Earlier this year, we actually managed to onboard one of the top 10 games of all time onto Kadem. We're now supporting all of their objects and props production for their game. But this is a rough timeline. As you can see, there's endless ups and downs, many mistakes, a lot of struggles, as well as success moments. So yeah, I guess the message here is like, things will go wrong. You just need to persevere and move on. So yeah, the journey, what I'm trying to say here is essentially that the journey from, being a CS graduate to being in production with one of the top 10 games and supporting right now the biggest e-commerce company. I bet you guys are all using it very frequently. With their marketing imagery was filled with many tears. And this is, nothing to be ashamed of. It's like nothing great was ever built with no struggle. And I do believe that. But yeah, and I guess the other message here is that if a CS graduate who knows nothing about anything can do it, any one of you can also do it, and there's no excuses. Okay, a bit about Kadem right now. So over the past couple of years, we've grown from like a team of 5 people 2 years ago to a team of 50 all around the world. With teams in San Francisco, London, Singapore, and many, many more places around the world. Our main office now is in San Francisco, with kind of like the core engineering team and myself. And I promised to talk a bit about my day-to-day. I know we have been talking kind of like more high level on a year to year, but yeah, I can spend some time telling you what I do today. I want like a quick note here is that what I do day to day really changes based on the phase of the company or even the time of the year. So for example, if it's fundraise time, obviously I am not doing sales and I'm not growing the team. I speak to investors and I am trying to get the money for the company that we need. But right now, over the past like year or so, I've been really, really focused on just growing the company and building the business. No investors in sight, and we're not also planning to fundraise anytime soon. So I think this is the time to really go deep and make as much progress as possible. So right now I'm leading sales. It's 6:30 a.m. here. Like in Los Angeles, we're doing like a lot of executive briefings to like Netflix and Paramount and Sony and Warner Bros. Over the next couple of days. My second responsibility is product evolution. So I'm contributing in building the product. This means like, okay, what do we need to build to get these enterprise customers on board? Doing a lot of customer success too, talking with our customers, our largest customers, understanding their needs, and making a product roadmap along with the team. All of our engineering team also is leading in that. Like this is not something I do single-handedly in any way. And I think the third, and actually the most important thing I do day to day, is growing the team. I said earlier we have about 50 people, but actually the core team of engineers is very small. We're actually 7 people strong as like an in-house team, and then we have about 40 people that are 3D artists or all around the world that support us with data set creation, QA of 3D models, etc., etc. So I have a really strong focus now and for the foreseeable future for growing the in-house team. I've been burnt a lot on that subject. And at Cadim, we also have a culture that is not commonly, I guess it's not common. We're a very hardworking bunch, and this many times scares people away from working with us. But yeah, these are the three main things that I'm working on. And another thing that I want to kind of like throw some light on is that my day is not 8 hours and my day is not 9 hours and it's not even 10. My day for the past probably 4 years is 14 hours or more, depending on, if we have things that are on fire and we urgently need to do things and so on and so on. But, you start from 14 hours and you go from there. I can't remember the last time that I spent in the office, less than 12 hours. I don't think this has ever happened. So this is another reality. And many times no weekends too. This is another reality. Like I think if you want to achieve something huge, and at Cadim we want to be a $1 billion company, we want to, go as high as we can. And I obviously believe that what we do has a very, very big potential. But if I come from Greece originally. So I believe that if you want to achieve something that's very, very big, you actually need to work very, very hard. And sometimes working smart doesn't really cut it. You really need the sheer amount of hours to go into what you're building. Okay, and on that note, we have a lot of time for Q&A. I think last message from me is if you are to take one thing away from today and from me is this, that resilience and perseverance are, in my opinion, the most important attributes a founder can have or a founding team can have. Don't exclude your first employees. They also will need to have extreme amounts of perseverance. But yeah, I think these are the most important attributes to building a company from scratch. This and building the right team around you to support all of this ambition. And why do I think that? It's because mistakes will happen, struggle will happen. And at startups, the one who stays alive the longest is the one who wins. Only in the past 1 year, I know probably tens of, maybe not tens, but like maybe at least half a dozen to a dozen startups in our space, in the 3D, in the AI for 3D space, that have either died, pivoted away because the problem is so hard, or run out of money. Like, which is, I guess, the same with dying. But why do I say this? It's like, it's very easy to give up and it's very easy to move on if something is harder than you thought, or if I don't know, you run out of money. There's always, I think, a choice, and there's always a solution to a problem that you're having, but many times it'll be a very hard choice. So resilience, that's my final message. So yeah, guys, we have like 20 minutes of Q&A, so feel free to ask me anything. This can be like an open discussion. Yeah. Awesome. I mean, I'm just gonna call names. Thomas, do you wanna start?
Yeah, first of all, wonderful presentation. Thank you for that. I'm wondering, at the beginning, when you sort of identified the problem, like of the difficulty of game development, like, could you elaborate on sort of that process? Like, how did you validate that? And yeah, just that.
Okay, how did I validate that the problem is big enough?
Yeah.
So when I realized that games are made out of 3D models and that it took me 2 days to make a chair, I started researching how much time games take to be developed. And this was really surprising to me, because I started finding out that, 10 years ago, games were made in 2 or 3 years. 5 years ago, games were made in 6 to 7 years. And nowadays, games are made to 10 years. I mean, how long are we going to wait for the next GTA? I think the last one was like, I don't know, 10 years of production. And then I started looking into, why is this happening? Like, why do games take so long to be developed? And one of the things I stumbled upon is like, actually 3D asset creation takes many times for, a heavy game in terms of like art, more than 50% of the budget. But if something takes more than 50% of the budget, we're talking about like tens of millions of dollars budget, right? If I come to you and say, hey, I can make this 10 times more efficient, I am already saving you millions. So it's like, okay, this is a huge opportunity here. There's no one in the space. This thing costs millions of dollars per game, multiplied by amount of games. And I always had in my mind that this is only the start, because architecture, product design, e-commerce, all of these guys are heavily using 3D assets in their actual pipelines. So research is the answer. I researched it. Okay, awesome. Who wants to go next? I think I have Mary Brenda.
Hi. Wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for those insights. So I have actually posted a few questions. And the first one, maybe just some quick clarification, was that the first startup competition was idea-based and subsequently for okay. Then for the first angel investor, how did you go about getting this investor, and was it still based on the idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for the startup competition, I'm trying to remember. This was like over 4 years ago. I think it was idea based, but you had to support it with like a lot of research and talking to users, kind of thing. So I definitely remember having like in these slides, so this is all the amount of people we talked to, and this is what we found out. And oh yeah, we had visited Artman, which is an animation studio based in Bristol, and we had kind of like warmed them up into a pilot, so we were able to showcase all of that. Then for the first angel investor, angel investor, we actually had a prototype or demo that you could upload an input image and you would get the reconstruction of a 3D model. So yeah, those were the proof points that we had for these points in getting money.
Should I go on, or should I let someone else have like
we can look through. I don't see many questions. So Kelsey, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. Hi, Konstantina. Firstly, again, amazing presentation, and I find your journey incredibly admirable. So yeah, thank you for the inspiration today. So my question is more on the social impact and around the responsible governance that we all have around AI at this moment. So as you know, a lot of people are living in fear about the AI revolution. So how is your organization sort of managing social tensions, essentially where your technology is alleviating a lot of the creativity from humans? So do you see that as a threat to your organization, or are you in a position where you're managing these tensions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it will ever be the case that AI replaces human creativity. And this is coming from CEO of a company that creates 3D assets as like our main product. Why do I think that? And what we do as Katium is actually the biggest example of what I just said. So our machine learning algorithms combine with our in-house team of 3D artists, who actually are the ones who put in the creativity to deliver the 10x acceleration that we deliver. When it comes to 3D modeling, as I described in the beginning, it's an incredibly labor-intensive and time-consuming process. This leads, and actually there's not enough 3D artists in the world to do this. So what we've seen many times, there's a lot of kind of like press about this, is crazy times of crunch for the whole gaming industry, where people work 20 hours a day to be able to meet the deadlines. Deadlines always get postponed, and so the game is not going to be released in like 2 months. It will actually be released in 6 months now because of delays, and so on and so on. So one of the main kind of like pain points we alleviate is allowing people to be more productive and like not having to crunch to push to essentially meet the deadline. And when it comes to specifically like 3D art, going into the nitty-gritty, like the low level, you can imagine Katium as something that gives you a starting point, but you still maybe it automates the rough parts, like the rough shape, and then you still have to put on top all of the creativity of a human artist that would anyway go in. So yeah, it's just a speed up, which is also the case for anything AI related nowadays, right? So let's say you want to write an essay. You can start from something like, you can get the help from AI to start from a point that, it's not a blank page, and then you can iterate this, edit this, and make it really yours, and still get a 10x speed up. So yeah, I think this will become more and more important, and I see AI, as a co-pilot, really, as a helper, as someone something that can give you this accelerant without diluting who you are, your creativity, and so on.
Amazing, thank you.
Okay, we have
Konstantina, sorry, just going to dive in. Just before you take the next question, when you take the question, could you try muting yourself? Because I think we're getting quite a bit of echo appearing on the call.
100%.
Cheers,
awesome.
thank you.
Sounds good. So we have San. I think, Jamin, do you want to go next?
Yeah, okay, thanks. I was just sort of personally wondering what your motivations for starting a company in the first place was. Was it like the game dev element of it, or were you sort of interested in that before that?
Yeah, that's a good question. My motivations. I mean, I think I have actually more motivations now than what I did 5 years ago, because I now realize where we can go with this. I think 5 years or 4 years ago, when it was like super early stages, what I was motivated from was solving a really big problem. And I was like, oh my God, I discovered something no one else has discovered, kind of thing. Like, oh my God, how can people not see this? I really want to work on this problem. I think now, like over the years, this motivation has changed, because now I'm like, I am motivated from how big I see this becoming. I'm motivated from the team that I'm working with. I think, through many struggles, we've built an amazing team. But I think, yeah, to answer your question, like back in the day, it was like, I've discovered a really big opportunity, and I think I'm one of the very few people that know this. So it's very exciting to me. I think, yeah. I never, back in the day, I never was thinking like, oh my God, I'm going to build $1 billion company. That came post YC. If you saw my little line there, I think I started getting introduced to that the more Silicon Valley content that I was consuming.
I see. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat as well. I don't know if you've spotted those. I think there's one from Eleni came in first. This was around how did you find your first angels? What approach did you follow for the first hires? And did you have to do any hands-on work initially, considering your tech background, or did you rely only on other people for that?
Okay, yeah, awesome. Eleni, thank you. So how did I find my first angels? I'm not sure if you guys can hear the background. I think someone. Okay, thanks.
Just muted.
Muted. Thanks. So in terms of the first angels, our first ever angel, which kind of like came on board on his own, I found through game founders in the UK. So I started talking to a couple of game founders, and one of them introduced me to Rebellion founder and CTO, who is our investor. So it was through my effort to speak to as many game founders as possible that I met Chris, and obviously I pitched him. He was interested to invest, and he came on board. But then for the first angel round, where I had like a big volume of angels coming on board, that was actually founder introduction, like startup founder introductions, who were later stage in their startup journey. They had already raised their seed, maybe closer to their Series A, and they were able to make all of these introductions for me, like, because some of them were already their investors, and investors are always looking for introduction. So that's why I said, like, chatting with other founders, especially founders that are a couple steps ahead, has been probably the most helpful thing for me and the progression of the journey. Did you, what approach did you follow for the first hires? I can tell you, but don't follow it, please. It was completely wrong. I mean, the budget was extremely small for my first hires, because we only had 150K in the bank. So it's like, okay, can we get 2 or 3 people that are engineers? But the budget was incredibly small. I didn't know what I was looking for. What approach did you follow? Exactly. There was no approach, essentially, for the first hires. I knew really nothing about hiring, fresh out of uni. And yeah, that's not good. I can tell you what approach I follow now. But none of these hires actually made it long enough, not even like 1 year for their 1 year anniversary. Did you have to do the work initially? Yes. I was hands-on building the product for the first 2 years of the journey. Okay. So we have some more here. I'm just reading them through. Okay, so someone asks if Kadem bridges the gap between AI generated content and game-ready assets with a team of artists that Kadem owns. And so the game-ready assets can be shipped to customers directly. I think that's correct. Let me rephrase the question to make sure everyone is on the same page. So the output from the AI is not production ready in many cases. So we bridge this gap, yes, with our in-house 3D team to make sure that what we deliver to our customers, because we're supporting large enterprise customers, is always production ready. I hope this answers the question. Someone asks, who are my competitors? What are the advantages of Kadem over Midjourney? Okay, that's a great question. So I want to remind you guys that we are turning images into 3D models, and we're not generating images. So obviously for Midjourney, you write the text prompt and you get an image, and Kadem actually uses Midjourney because we need to do our own data set creation, and to do our own data set creation, we need images. And obviously, what's the easiest way right now to generate images? Obviously, we use an AI to generate images. So the difference is that Midjourney generates images, but what we generate is digital 3D content. So we take an image and we turn it into a 3-dimensional something that you can rotate, essentially. Stella, let me know if that answers your question. Okay. Charles, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Really presentation. Could I just ask, what are your thoughts on taking the approach of building an MVP and then finding people to build a team with, or first finding those people and then building the MVP after that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if you can build the MVP on your own, you should. I think that's my advice. If you're technical and you have the skills to build the MVP, just do it. There's no reason why you should rely to someone else. Again, there's no one who will have more urgency than you do, if we assume that you're the founder. There's no one that will have more care than you do, again, assuming you're the founder. So anyway, in the startup journey, you will need to do so much on your own that you'll have no one to help you with. And you can't hire for everything. Like, okay, I want, like, a similar question is, I want to find my first ever customer. Do I hire a salesperson or do I do it myself? You do it yourself. Why? Because at the stage of MVP, you're probably one of the very, very few people in the world who have enough conviction that what you're building is valuable. So, and especially if you don't have funding, it's very hard to persuade others to come on board on this at this stage. So that's why technical founders, I think, have a very kind of like strong position and starting point. Hope this helps. But yeah, don't wait for anyone. Just do it. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, really inspiring talk. Thank you. I was just thinking in terms of the hiring process. How did you figure out the sort of technical requirements you needed of the people that you were bringing on board to achieve what you were trying to make with the company?
How did I figure the technical requirements? I mean, there's some basic ones that it's easier to find out. For example, we're building a web app, so I know I need software developers that know how to build front end and back end for the frameworks that we started using. So in our case, we know React and Node.js are important for our hires that will jump on board on the software engineering side of things. On the machine learning side of things, experience with 3D AI research as well as computer vision is important to us because, again, these are the technologies we use. So I guess how I figure out the technical specifications for a hire is actually what we're building and what we see in the foreseeable, like where do we want to expand? At some point, we expanded into building Blender tools, so building tools inside the 3D modeling software. So nowadays, we definitely look for familiarity with 3D modeling software such as Blender. But I think the technical specifications are actually some of the easiest things you can figure out for the hire, because they can be quantifiable, I guess. Like, do you know React.js? Yes or no? It's like, and then you can test someone how much they know React or any other framework. I think where things have been really tricky for us in terms of hiring has been with the culture. How do you tell if someone is up for the startup culture? How do you tell if someone is up for the startup grind? How do you tell if someone is hardworking? How do you tell if someone cares? And so on and so on and so on. I think these are the kind of like the soft skills and qualities that are actually much harder to quantify and tell from just the interview process.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's interrupting the thanks. We're just approaching the last 5 minutes on the call. So if there are any last questions, if you want to put those either into the chat or raise your hand, we'll try to get to as many of them as we can.
I really like the question that says, how do you balance attracting specialists like machine learning engineers and artists to join your team as a startup with limited funds? That's a great question. So my approach, obviously there's different approaches, and someone can tell you that, their approach was to raise a lot of money and go and hire them. My approach was not that. I actually hired the opposite. I hired generalists, and I got on board people who are not afraid to start something, to learn something new from scratch. So my first ever engineers actually knew when they started working with Kaidim, they knew very little, but they were the kind of people that, whatever you throw in front of them, they're just going to learn it and try to thrive, like be very, very good at it. So my general advice is not good, but in our case, hiring generalists, people who, can do software dev, can understand a computer vision algorithm, can fine tune, an AI model, has worked the best, because the breadth of what we need to do is like wide. And also, as a startup, you need to try different things. So if you get a specialist, let's say that this person is the most, one of the biggest researchers in 3D AI, what do you do then? Like, let's say you need to try a different approach. So now let's solve this problem, not using 3D AI, but using computer vision. This is a random example. What will this specialist do, right? They only want to do only a specific part. And this is actually one of the things you should be careful when you're hiring from very large companies. So for example, if you were to hire a machine learning engineer from Google or DeepMind or Meta, whatever this is, many of these people are used to only actually even part of the pipeline. So you'll hear machine learning engineers doing only research, or only deploying the models, or only fine tuning, or only data science for the data set, or only cleaning this data set. And these people might have a really hard time to adapt to a startup environment where they need to own the end-to-end pipeline and not just their little like space there that they can really focus. So yeah, I've never hired specialists, just like people who are willing to learn. In terms of artists, we found artists through like freelance networks. There's very, very few companies actually that offer full-time opportunities to artists. So we're an attractive company on that front. Okay, and I think I'm just gonna address a final question from Mary Brenda, who asks, how did you successfully raise with so few customers and no MVP before then? So that's the first part of the question. 2, I think to raise your first ever round, you don't need a lot. I think the most important things that investors look at is how big can the idea get? So I always in my slide had in my deck, I had a slide which was proving that we can be a billion-dollar company. So this was like 3 million 3D artists in the world times, you know, $1,000 each for this subscription, for Kdim subscription, because that's how much we estimate how much value we can offer to them, equals X $1 billion. So they need to see that the idea is big enough. Is the first, and your research need to be able to prove that this can become huge. And then secondly, it's just about the founder fit. It's about the founder. Why are you the best person to work on this idea, and what are the qualities that will really help you? I mean, and again, I will say this again, if I could do it as like a graduate with, you know, no PhD, no, you know, major qualifications to do this, anyone can. I think passion and like hard work really shows, and investors do appreciate that. But yeah, I guess that's a short answer. What spaces do you go into to raise funds, or is it via applications? I hope it was via applications, and they just, you know, this is not application based. I mean, it's kind of application based because you need to reach out to every single fund, and you need to persuade them to open your email, and then you need to persuade them to reply to your email. So I would call it as like a, you know, a huge outbound effort to get people to talk to you. And the most helpful tips is talk to founders who have raised, ask them for introductions, ask them for tips and tricks for how to fundraise. Come to Silicon Valley if you can. I'm laughing, but it's actually crazy. I'll tell this story and then I think we're out of time. I was working at the WeWork here in San Francisco a couple years ago, and no team here in SF. I was just alone. And a person comes to me and they say, "Hey, what are you working on?" Random person. I'd never seen him in my life before. And I say, "Well, I'm working on a startup." And he was like, "What's the startup about?" And I tell him literally a 5-liner about what we do. And after this, he says, "Oh, I'd love to invest." And he literally gave me a $50K check, like $50,000. This is unbelievable in like anywhere in Europe. But these things happen in a WeWork in San Francisco if you are there late enough in the night. But anyway, yeah, no, thank you everyone for joining. It was awesome to speak to you. I know we're out of time.
Thank you so much, Konstantinos. Giving up your early morning, I'm sure you've got a very long day in front of you. So thank you so much for spending your time with us. I think you can see the sort of the claps, the round of applause that are coming in, lots of questions, some super engaged students here. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for coming along. The recording will be found in the Teams channel. We'll also upload it onto the Careers Service. Excuse me. The Careers Service recording webpage. You'll be able to access that with your Imperial login to get into there. So once again, thanks you very much, Konstantinos, for coming along today from Kdim, and to our audience. You can see all of the chats that are going through there, and I wouldn't be surprised if you get a couple of students maybe reaching out to you, coming off the background of being pragmatic, resilient, resourceful, networking. Those are, I think, some of the key takeaways from today. So thank you once again. Have a good rest of your day.